So again, welcome everyone. I'm Pamela Sirianis. I'm the coordinator of programs and community partnerships at Strong Minds, Strong Kids Psychology Canada. And today we have Dr. Robin Alter and Anne Murray with us to talk about supporting our children during difficult times, the struggle to juggle. Just going to play a short video for you all sharing about our organization.
Hello, and welcome to Strong Minds, Strong Kids Psychology Canada Wellness Webinar Series. We're delighted you've decided to join us today. At Strong Minds, Strong Kids Psychology Canada, we believe that prevention is the intervention needed. We can't wait until our kids suffer from a mental illness. That is why we promote mental well-being in kids before mental health issues begin. We are a registered charity with over 45 years of experience effectively nurturing resilience in kids with the use of psychological science. Our programs span the developmental stages of kids, starting as early as birth. Make the Connection is our attachment-based program that is aimed to improve parent-child relationships during the first 3 years. A secure attachment in the early years is proven to build the foundation for long-term healthy development. Make the Connection is designed to help parents and caregivers develop that secure attachment with their young ones. For over 20 years, Strong Minds, Strong Kids has been training educators and child-serving professionals in our resilience building programs. Kids have stress too, and stress lessons. From pre-kindergarten to grade 12, these programs help children and youth become healthier and more resilient by teaching them how to identify and manage their stress. Each program is linked to curriculum and offers psychologically sound strategies and tools that will help children and youth develop resilience and positive coping skills that will help them manage life's inevitable ups and downs. A critical pillar in nurturing resilience in children and youth is ensuring there is a supportive, caring adult in their life. We developed stressstrategies.ca, which is an interactive tool designed to help adults identify and manage their stress. The tool provides a variety of research-backed stress management strategies and guides you through questions which will lead you to the development of your own personalized stress management plan. Please go to stressstrategies.ca to create your action plan today. And don't forget to visit our website, www.strongmindsstrongkids.org, to learn more about our Make the Connection e-learning course, our resilience building training programs and facilitation guides. You'll find our library of free psychology-based webinars in a variety of booklets and tip sheets that will help you support children and youth in building the strongest foundation for mental health.
I'd also like to continue with the land acknowledgement. So welcome everyone, and our head office is located on sacred land that has been a site of human activity for over 15,000 years. This land is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Mississaugas of the New Credit, the Haudenosaunee, the Chippewa, and the Wendat. It is now home to many diverse peoples. We acknowledge that the City of Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaties, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. We acknowledge these nations and any other recorded or unrecorded First Peoples who cared for the land as the past, present, and future caretakers of the land named Toronto, where the trees meet the water or the gathering place. As settlers, we entered into an agreement to share this land equitably. As settlers, this recognition of contributions and historic importance of Indigenous peoples must also be clearly and overtly connected to our collective commitment to make the promise of and the challenge of truth and reconciliation real in our communities. We're grateful for the opportunity to work with communities and on this territory. So just a highlight of our Kids Have Stress Too and Stress Lessons programs. They're evidence-informed programs and are youth-centered and inquiry-based to teach tangible stress management strategies and skills to build emotional resiliency in children and youth, both in and out of the classroom. I'd like to introduce you all to Dr. Robin Alter. Dr. Robin Alter is a registered clinical psychologist in practice for over 40 years. In her consulting capacity, she also consults to the Indigenous community regarding fetal alcohol syndrome and conducts FASD assessments. Her current practice includes both the assessment and treatment for children, adolescents, and adults. While running her own practice, Dr. Alter has also taught courses in psychology part-time at York University. She's the author of several books and has been working with Strong Minds, Strong Kids Psychology Canada for over 10 years in a variety of capacities. I'd also like to introduce you all to Anne-Marie. Anne has a master's in education and has worked for many years as a registered nurse in Ontario. She has a broad interest in families, focusing on creating resilient schools and communities. She works with families, educators, and youth, coaching and facilitating ways to recognize, reduce, and develop strategies for managing the stressors in their lives. Since 1999, Anne has been instrumental to the development of Kids Have Stress Too programs initiated by Strong Minds, Strong Kids Psychology Canada. Anne is the lead trainer with SMSKPC, providing training, program development, and building partnerships with a focus to reduce stress in our children and youth. We'd also like to get to know you a little bit. So I'm going to start with a poll asking where everyone is from. So we've got many folks from Central region, so Ontario and Quebec. We've got a few others from the Prairie regions, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta. And we've got some folks joining us from Newfoundland, PEI, Nova Scotia, or New Brunswick. And we also want to know whether you're a parent, a professional, or both, so we can understand better who our audience is today. And we've got a lot of parents joining us today. Some are both professionals and parents. But yeah, so it'll be very interesting to learn more about supporting our kids. And one last poll for you all. What is the age group that you work with or live with or support? So age 0 to 3, 4 to 12, or 13 to 17. So many of us are working with or supporting children and youth aged 4 to 12, but we also have folks supporting younger and older age groups. Great. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can see everyone's beautiful faces and get started. Thanks, Robin and Anne, for joining us today.
Great to be here.
Yeah, so I'll start with the first question and we'll jump right in. Anne, really basic question to help ensure we're all on the same page. Let's talk about what stress is and what does that look like in a child's brain versus an adolescent and an adult.
Great. Thanks so much, Pamela. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Congratulate yourself that you've managed through all these months and you're here today to learn more. So stress certainly is the factor that we look at with how it affects our body. So stress really is that stress response. What goes on in the body that shifts it? So we have a stressor, something out there that causes us to feel this stress and have this stress response. And it because of us being human, it affects us in similar ways, but our awareness is different based on our age and stage of development. So when we see something that affects our brain, our amygdala says, I'm worried, I'm bothered, I can't cope, that's when the stress response happens. So that's that fight or flight or freeze that we've heard about. And that's where it can affect our body, our minds, our feelings, our behaviors. So how does it change whether we're a young infant or 94-year-old? It can be very similar in the sense that the amygdala is reacted to feel I can't cope. Then it sets off the hormones in the body, adrenaline and cortisol are produced, and that happens in whoever we are, whatever age and stage. And it gets other parts of the body releasing sugar, releasing that muscle, that oxygenated blood, getting more breaths in, and that heart rate going up. But where it can be different is that we as adults may be more aware of what's happening to us. It can be such a sudden response in our brain that leads to this confusion and scatteredness and maybe upset stomach or headache. And our young people and our youth aren't always aware of what does this mean, nor are we. But if we can become more aware of it, that can make such a difference. So to answer that question, stress really is that stress response, what goes on in our body, because we all respond in different ways to what's going on out there. Those of you with a young child they're excited to go to a birthday party, and others are very stressed by it. That's not as much the concern as what's going on in the body with the response.
Thanks, Anne. And now, Robin, a question for you. In addition to volunteering for Strong Minds, Strong Kids, you're also a clinical psychologist. Can you talk a little about how the mental health landscape for children has changed in the wake of COVID? For example, we're now hearing, now that we've started the new school year, we're back in school and kids are experiencing school in a different way. Can you speak a little bit to the landscape that we're now in?
Well, I think, well, we shouldn't think that everything is okay, that we've just gone back to what we've had before and that everybody is settling in. I mean, I'm getting in my practice, hearing about and trying to help kids who actually were quite comfortable being isolated because they had social problems and, they were kind of saw the whole COVID experience as a break from the social pressures. And so now they're having to deal with those, real life social experiences again. Many kids have lost ground academically. They were having struggles before, and being home and having online schooling, which they did or not did, there was, not the most consistent compliance with all of the academic requirements. And so kids are now experiencing the gap of what they haven't been experiencing. So it's really a mixed bag. Some kids are delighted to be back at school with their friends and just back in the activity. Of course, I don't see those kids. They don't come to, a child psychologist. But the ones that are coming because of it's another huge adjustment. For adults, 2 years is kind of a blip, but for a kid, a 2-year span is a huge chunk of their life. If you're 6 years old, 2 years is a third of your life. So you can almost not remember what was going on, pre-pandemic. It just seems like another lifetime ago. So there's a lot of different reactions. So that's basically what I'm seeing.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Robin or Anne, either one of you can answer this, or maybe you both want to. A lot of parents and allies are worried about the amount of screen time that kids are logging in. Prior to returning back to school, they had to do school online as well, on top of after school hours. Can you give some realistic tips on the healthiest ways to manage kids' screen time?
Go for it, Anne. Oh, I think she's frozen.
Oh, whoops.
Okay, well, I'll take it. I mean, in any time, parents need to limit screen time. There needs to be some limits, and I would suggest that I think the question was posed, how can we reintroduce kids to limits? And, you want to do it, if you can, more slowly, just, subtract 10 minutes or so from whatever was previously done. But there's all kinds of reasons to limit screen time. The screens themselves are unhealthy. Engaging with social media is unhealthy for your mental health as well as your emotional health. But probably the best way to limit screen time is to have kids engaged in other activities. The more constructive activities they're involved in, the less time there is for screens. So, if you have, more family activities that are fun, which kids do seem to still like, engaging with their parents and siblings in a more structured way, having game time or movie time or video time. The more we introduce those kinds of things, the less we have to be policemen and just be limiting the screen time.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Well, since Anne's trying to get sorted out again, I'll just continue asking you, Robin. How can we talk to our kids about managing their feelings? How do we talk to our partners or parents or other adults when we disagree about stressors or how to manage stress that children feel?
Okay, well, there's two questions in there. How do we talk to kids about feelings? I think this is a really important one. Everybody, well, I shouldn't say everybody, but a lot of people, adults and children alike, have trouble talking about feelings. Feelings can be very ambiguous. And I find that a lot of kids really like talking about feelings when you put a scale, use numbers rather than words. Because words, can be very ambiguous, and we, what is sadness to you may be very different from what sadness is to me. And if we could spend probably hours trying to sort out the meaning of that word, but if you ask a kid, if you put numbers on a line, 1 to 10, and 10 is the saddest you've ever been, and 1 is just a little bit sad, where are you today? It's like taking your emotional temperature and getting a number. And then once you've done that, you can talk about it. Like if you're at a 9, what could we do to bring you to a 7 or a 6? Or where would you be? Like we may not be able to take all the sadness away, but we could take a little bit away. And in fact, when you take a little bit away, people start feeling better because they feel like they have some control and can manage it. And and also if you do this on a regular basis, you can see if things are getting better or worse over time. So, they used to in hospitals, and Anne probably knows this more than I do because she's a nurse, but they used to ask people about their pain, and people would go into long, detailed explanations trying to describe their pain. But now they just say on a scale of 1 to 10, where's your pain? And, one person's 10 is different from another person. But if you're at a 10 one day and the next day you're at an 8, then everybody knows things are getting better, or vice versa. If it's going up, things are getting worse. So it's clear. It's a much clearer, and it's concrete. And I've worked with this with kids as young as 3. So it's a wonderful way. Kids love it. They really do, because it's a way that they can communicate without having to try to find all these complicated words. So that's,
Yeah.
I think, a really good strategy to use. I have a whiteboard in my office, and many kids will come right into the office and go to the board and draw that line and draw the numbers, because they know that adults like to talk. And when we talk about a lot of things that are over their head. We use words that they really don't understand. And they love the clarity of this, so then they become the psychologist and they start putting the numbers down. And it's a really useful way to tap into and keep records, of where kids are at in terms of school. How was your day at school? Parents are always complaining. Well, I asked my kid how the day was, and they always say, nothing, or, they don't have anything to say. But if you ask them to rate it, they'll give you a number because it's easy and it's clear. And then you'll know if things are on the upswing or on the downturn. You're back in. Great.
I'm back. My apologies. My stressor is internet, and it happened, but I have my setup in our basement right beside my modem. Thank
Okay,
you for
great.
jumping in and continuing on. Good tag team here.
Yeah. Great. So we can move on to the next. Anne, you've been teaching adults about how children experience stress for a long time. What's the biggest misconception we as adults carry around about kids and stress?
So I've been involved since the 90s in this whole area. And I remember people would always say, "Man, kids don't have stress. We as adults have stress." Well, the truth is our children do experience stress at all different ages. Research has been done in orphanages and seen the cortisol levels as 2 or 3 infants might be in one crib and how the cortisols are elevated. So it's really important that we recognize as adults, yes, we do have stress, but so do our children. And we can notice that there may be things happening in their lives. Maybe we notice a change in who they are. Maybe they're really outgoing and then they become much quieter. That's where we can have that alertness that, okay, what's behind this situation? What is it maybe that's changed? Recognizing that transition can be very stressful. So we've heard where for some young people going back to school is more stressful. They prefer to be hidden behind the camera and at home, because the social can be very stressful for many children out in the schoolyard and being around other people. So there are factors that are very real. And so as an adult, to acknowledge that our children do experience that stress response where they get those elevated feelings within their body. They might get more hyperactive because those sugar levels are being elevated because of the release, because of the hormones. But you as the adult, one, to acknowledge that your children do experience stress, recognizing that it may show its way in different forms. And those of you who have more than one child, or those of you working professionally with many different children, you will see that children respond in different ways. So we want to hear it from the child's perspective, what bothers you, what upsets you, which is that stressor, and then see it of how it affects their body in terms of that stress response, and respond to it with strategies that can help them to find that calm. We really want to bring our young people and ourselves back to that neutral place, that place of calm. That can be taking deep breaths. That might be getting some exercise. We know that exercise is a great way to reduce the adrenaline and cortisol. That may be coloring because it just gets it out and we're having to use that prefrontal cortex that helps us to think it through. It might be explaining something to others. So there's a few ways, but yes, stress does affect our young people.
You've made me think of something. I wanted to add something to my previous response, which is you can use that scale, but the other way to help kids talk about feelings is to ask them to draw it. You know, if they don't have the words, kids like to draw. So, you know, that's a very, very, you know, that's meeting kids where they're at their developmental stage. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for adding that, Robin. Okay, on to the next one. I do want to say too, though, like these are great questions that everybody submitted. I'm so excited to continue getting to them because they've been quite wonderful. And how can parents deal with watching our children cope with disappointing situations, especially with all that is occurring during this pandemic?
Part of being a parent, and we have three boys that are now growing up, you realize as a parent, you know, we're very protective of our kids. We don't want to see them suffer. We don't want to have them have a difficult time. But we know in order to develop resiliency, we need to have some stress in our life with support. And that's where you as the parent can be that cheerleader. You can be that support. There will be disappointments, but being able to support our young people to learn through what that disappointment is and to grow from it, and to be able to try new ways so that next time they've experienced something that didn't work, that they can then move through it and find what can work. Because we know that the learning comes from having had that adversity. And there's a wonderful story that I share sometimes, and it's about the butterfly who's in a cocoon. And somebody saw it trying to get out of that cocoon, and they snipped the hole a bit bigger so it could come out easily. But it came out and its wings were all wet and it just crumbled away and died. Whereas the butterfly has to come through that cocoon and struggle so that it dries its wings and it can fly. And we all need to experience some struggle. The question I often get asked is, when is it too much struggle? And that's a judgment question. I don't have that magic answer, but certainly if it's morally wrong or if it's unsafe, we need to step in. We need to be there as a parent. But having some struggle is where we build that resiliency and build that muscle, but with a caring, supportive, consistent adult. It's not always the parents, but having an adult around them to build that relationship. Relationship is key to developing the ability to cope.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. That caring adult definitely helps. Awesome. And how can we help kids understand everything we don't have the answers to during these times?
Well, we know that these times have been very uncertain. We know that uncertainty is stressful. We have been experiencing as adults, especially back in March 2020. We continue to experience it. We're not totally out of it. Now parents are going through that place of, do I or don't I have the vaccine for my child once it's approved? There's lots of uncertainty. And so what we need to do during times of uncertainty is find what we can of certainty. And, what can we know? What can we do? What can give us that place of security, that gives us a place of control? And I, as a parent and, involved with many parents, believe that we also can say, I don't know. They see the humanness of who we are as a parent. We don't have all the answers, but we can explore it together. Maybe we can go to Google and find an answer. Maybe we can ask others and what they have found has worked. So that place of, we don't always have the answer, but the discovery, the collaboration, the fun we might be able to have to find the answer. So I would encourage not to be ashamed or feel, irresponsible because you don't have the answer. The world did not have the answer back in March 2020. So that's where the learning and the discovery happens.
Just thinking about that, Anne, we know a lot more now than we knew back in March of 2020. And, back then we really did know nothing. How many of us knew about viruses or how to keep ourselves safe? And we were all eager to learn and, had our ear to the TV, but we have learned a lot since then, and I think we have demonstrated to our kids how to deal with a crisis, how to get through a crisis. This has been a tremendous learning experience for all of us.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think us showing kids how to learn is one of the ways to help them understand that everybody's learning.
We are the role models for our children. And so for us to be able to say, I don't know, that gives permission for them to say, I don't know, and to ask for help. And asking for help, we know, is one of the significant factors that can help us to develop that resiliency.
Great, thank you. Robin, how can we get children to focus on the positives in challenging experiences?
It's such a great question. So thanking whoever asked it, because, kids do get into these negative cycles and, seem very pessimistic and, just nothing's going to work out and all of that stuff. And especially when they get upset about something, and we want to move them very quickly to seeing, that it's not so bad, things can work out. And unfortunately, now that we know more about the brain and how it works, that trying to move into the positive too quickly can be a mistake, okay? That what we need and what changes our brain chemistry is when we actually acknowledge the negative. We actually acknowledge and validate where they're at and say, oh yeah, I understand, it looks awful, the last time you did this, it wasn't good, and now you think it's going to be the same, and of course that seems terrible, and be very empathic and sympathetic. And in fact, that changes our brain so that the amygdala that Anne was talking about, it actually calms it down a bit. And then the frontal lobe, which is your more rational part, actually can take over. And then, so once that you validate their feelings, then, and it does take a little while, once that cortisol rush has happened, it does take a while for the cortisol to dissipate and get reabsorbed in the system. So if we try to move kids into more positive before that cortisol has diminished, it's not going to be very effective. But once the child has calmed down a bit, then you can talk about the positives, because then they can hear it. Then they're more receptive. So, just knowing about the brain chemistry and how it works can slow you down a bit, help you to be a little more patient with this process, and not get frustrated yourself because, your child is only saying the negative and won't listen to all the positive things that you're saying. You have to work with, what's happening in the brain and biology of the other person.
Yeah, absolutely. I know even as an adult, I get frustrated if somebody tells me to calm down without trying to hear me out when I'm upset or stressed, right? So imagine
Exactly.
as a kid.
Yeah. And if we move in too quickly with just breathe, and then kids get very angry. What do you mean? I'm feeling this distress, I can't just breathe, we have to, validate their feelings first, and then they can move on.
Yeah, and that provides a safer space for them too to share, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Wonderful. And Robin, again, how can we support students who are in need of counseling, but we don't have enough school counselors in the system or resources or even time?
Okay, again, this is a very important question. This depends on the severity of the need. If we have kids who we are really worried about, either because of self-harm or they're engaging in very unsafe behavior, hurting other people, then we can't wait for counseling. We should be taking them to the emergency room. Even if you think that there's not going to be a lot of help at the emergency room, which unfortunately happens. In my experience, over 40 years in clinical practice and a lot in children's mental health centers, it communicates a lot to a child when we take them to the emergency room. It says to them through our actions, which are much more powerful than words, that your life is important. And if you're suicidal and I'm afraid that you're going to hurt yourself, I'm going to take action. This is this is a serious matter. You may not think your life is important, but I think your life is important. And it's so important that we're taking you to see somebody. And even if you have to wait in the waiting room for a while, it communicates that, you're sitting there all that time because this is important. Okay. So, that's for the kids who are at risk and that we really need to not just put them on the back burner. All right. The kids who were not so much at risk and we're just, if they have, anxiety issues, or we think they may be depressed, or their home issues happening, then we need to be supportive. We need to try to help them as much as we can, listen to them, help them problem solve. As I said before, sometimes we can't take away the problem or eradicate it completely, but we can do simple things that may make things a little better. If we can get them from a 10 to an 8, that's worth doing, and, sometimes it's, distracting them. Sometimes it's introducing some positive activity. Sometimes it's just listening to them, just spending time with them, showing them that, you care, and being empathic. So, even when children come to a children's mental health center and get counseling, that's sometimes all we do. We can't fix all the problems, but we can make life a little better. And in fact, that's a good thing to learn, that you can improve your situation and make yourself feel better. It's all. And so that's basically it.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great response. I think that definitely clears things up for some folks. And how do we help children coping with stress when us ourselves as adults might be very stressed?
And that is such a very real one that has gone on for many months. First and foremost is acknowledging that I feel stress and recognizing that that is part of this pandemic. We've never lived through it. It's a historical moment. And looking at and applauding yourself for having been able to get through each day. This is a place of taking care of you. Many of us, when we were traveling, we'd hear it with the oxygen mask, and it gets lowered on the plane, and they say, put it on yourself first, and then put it on your senior you're traveling with or your child that you're traveling with. We need to take care of ourselves first, get that oxygen to be able to take care of others. So the first place can be acknowledging, yes, that you're feeling stressed, but looking at some aspects of maybe what you've done in the past to take care of yourself. Are there opportunities to get some exercise, to get out in nature, which we know is a very positive influence on our brain? It can be looking outside the window. It can also be out there. Exercise, we know, is so positive. Is there a place that you can plan ahead? Is that contributing to what is causing these stressors for you, that there's just too much to do? Maybe some of you are working from home, and so it's that boundary that is just so blurred of what's home doing work and what's home taking care of the home, taking care of my kids. And can you find ways to draw the line between the two? Maybe it is changing your clothes. Maybe it's having a shower. Maybe it's texting a friend. Maybe it's having a favorite snack. Looking at what you can do for yourself, like connecting with other people. We know that isolation can be a factor. Are there people that you can connect with, and maybe you can team up with? Okay, let's do a double meal and we'll split it then, and you have it one night and I have the other half one night, and then we each have the other meal that the other person's made. Maybe there are ways that you can do that. Another big place when you are feeling stressed, which is a very real one, I think just to acknowledge it is important, looking at what your expectations are of yourself, because we can expect a lot of ourselves as a parent. Certainly some of you are single parents, and all the workload that has to be done just to manage a home and kids, and now getting them out there and where some of them may be with their response to school. Maybe our expectations have to be lowered. Maybe the place won't be as clean. Maybe we will have the repetitive meals more often. But coming down to how can I support my children when I'm feeling this? Maybe there's some places to bring laughter into your home, to bring playing games, to ask the children, what do you want? So that it doesn't always put it on you to find the solutions. Maybe they find ways that can make it a less stressful situation at home. Maybe it is having to talk to your employer about how things can be shifted, because there's no question those that were trying to work full time with young kids had that very heavy stress load in terms of what they were trying to manage. So taking something from this might be helpful. Looking at what's going right. The more we can use that part of our brain to look at optimism and hope and positive, it helps to produce endorphins that can make us feel better. So maybe there's something you put on the fridge and what's going right, and you jot things down, the kids jot things down. So then you have this gratitude list that might help you through. But do pat yourself on the back of all that you have accomplished over these months. It's going to be looked at in historical ways in years from now, and looking back, and you can say you were in the trenches with it and got through.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Anne. And Robin, how can we engage kids willingly in the home and get them a little bit more active and involved in relationships with others in their family?
Well, I thought the question was more about how to get kids engaged when they don't have as many friends,
Yeah.
right? And they're feeling lonely, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so when I was working in the Children's Mental Health Center, we used to talk about the only children and what parents needed to do with them. And, it was very clear that, parents need to play with only children more because kids need to play and kids learn how to play and how, all those social skills, how to play, how to lose in a game, how to share, how to engage in a creative, imaginative way with another person. They learn that all in the home. And if there's no kids to play with, then the adults need to play with them more. And so I think we're kind of in a time now where that's true again, because kids are not going in as many play dates. Parents are a little bit, they don't know what other parents may, how rigorous they are with respect to COVID precautions, how safe they might be in somebody else's home. So a lot of the kind of social activity that kids used to have, they're not having now. So parents need to take up the slack and play more with their kids. I know, they may not like this answer because I'm adding something onto their plate, but in fact, it may be good for the parents too. When Anne was talking about taking care of your stress, playing with your kids is, one of the best ways for you to reduce stress. And, laughter, kids love to be silly and laugh, and they will help parents get less stressed if you actually take the time to play with your kids. I can't stress this enough. Intimacy happens one-on-one. And when we are intimate with another person, we feel connected. We make that connection. We feel secure. It's also one of the best ways to improve your child's self-esteem, because it's, if you want to improve your child's self-esteem, I know a lot of people give them lots of compliments and tell them how great they are, but I hope I'm not disappointing you, because kids negate a lot of those statements because they say, well, you're my parents, you're supposed to say that, so they don't believe parents when they say all those good things. But when you actually sit down and play with your kids and enjoy them and laugh with them and have a good time with them, they feel on top of the world, because a parent is the number one person in their life that they care about. You are the most important person to them. And if the most important person is having a good time with them, then they must be okay. And if the parent says things like, oh, that was fun, I had such a good time with you, then their self-esteem goes soaring through the roof. And then they're much better able to deal with all the struggles and challenges of being a child, of which there are many. So I think the best answer to this is find the time. It doesn't have to be a lot of time, but find some time to play with your kid, and you will benefit, they will benefit, they will learn the skills they need to learn, and everybody will come out the better for it.
Yeah, that's great. I never really thought of it that way, but you're right. Like, they provide some more tangible reinforcement for them, right? That event was great. I had a lot of fun doing that, versus
Yes.
You're great, you're a good kid.
Yes, and if you actually look like you're having a good time, you're laughing, you're enjoying them, you're enjoying being with them, you're enjoying whatever they're creating. It makes you feel good and it makes them feel good. It's all very positive. And the thing that kids want more than anything is time with their parents. They want that attention. People say they just want attention. Well, attention is the thing that they want and need. And if kids don't get that attention, then they want things. That's when they start hounding you for presents and toys and things that cost money, because time is money. Parents say, well, I can't play with you because I have to make money. Well, if you're giving your time to your job and you're not giving it to me, and you're doing your job to make money, and if I can't get your time, then I'll take your money.
Good analogy. Yeah.
Kids are very smart that way.
Figure it out.
They figure it out.
Time is what keeps coming up as what kids are wanting. And that's been the gift of COVID, is that in the earlier days, it was giving more time and
Yes,
calm and being able to, you know, have conversations around the kitchen table or being able to play some games. And that is what enhances that relational piece, and relationship is what it's all about to
right.
help to keep us connected. As I always say, our kids are going to choose our nursing home. So we want to build relationships. Keep it strong.
Unless we choose it ourselves first.
Well,
I'm not going anytime fast.
that was great. Thanks, you too. And Robin, what happens when children are exposed to COVID at school or sorry, I guess not what happens, but when children are exposed to COVID at school and now resisting due to the anxiety and fear all around, you know, catching it or being exposed to it again, what can we do to help them?
Well, this is, you know, my answer to this has to do with how you always deal with kids' anxiety. You know, kids exposed to COVID at school have anxiety about it. And, you know, we have to evaluate how realistic that anxiety is. You know, anxiety has been our friend through COVID. You know, I make a distinction between fear and anxiety. Fear is when the whatever we're afraid of is real, and COVID was real. So our fear of COVID worked for us, because the more fearful we were, the better we behaved. You know, we listened to the advice, we wore masks, we socially distanced. You know, we were careful about who we associated with, the crowds, the number of people. All of that stuff is because we're afraid. And so fear is an important component here. People who are not afraid are not behaving well. But when we feel that the child needs to go back to school, then we have to enlist our bravery. You know, we can't run away from things. Every time you avoid something that you're anxious about, you strengthen that fear and anxiety response. You know, we have to do everything we can to make ourselves safe, and then venture. You know, the more we go out and do the things that we're anxious about, the more that fear and anxiety goes away. You know, unfortunately, you know, it's a fine line, because some of us are not being careful because we, you know, have stopped being anxious. And so we're letting our guard down, you know. So, you know, parents have to make a decision. You know, they have to be really clear in their communications with kids, what they want them to do to stay safe. You know, keep your mask on, you know, stay away from people who are not wearing masks. You know, we have to have rules for kids, but we shouldn't encourage them, and we shouldn't allow them to just give in to the fear and anxiety and stay home. Then they will never get back to normalcy. And you know, so we, you know, you know, basically, you know, that's one of the treatments for anxiety, because anxiety is being afraid of something out of proportion, you know, exaggerating the threat, and you know, either being afraid of things that we should never be, you know, that are not going to be harmful to us, or exaggerating the harmfulness of the threat. And you know, if, you know, we have to slowly, but, you know, securely, consistently move in the direction of action, and not just giving in and allowing the anxiety to control our behavior. Because the more we do that, the bigger the anxiety becomes, because in our minds we exaggerate it, you know, and the reality is usually much less than what we're dealing with in our minds.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And Anne, how can we overcome the urge to bail our children out of troubling relationships or situations?
Great question. And it certainly is a very real one as a mother, that we want to protect our children. So as a parent, you don't want to see your children have harm. But as I mentioned earlier, it's only through challenging situations that we gain that muscle, that we overcome it, that we get to that place to say, I can do it, and can feel really good about I can do it and learn from it. There's a psychologist here in in Toronto, Dr. Alex Russell, and he talks about that non-catastrophic failure and, you know, the need that is relevant to each developmental age and stage of our young people, that need to be able to try to figure it out. And in figuring it out, we get that place of that, I'm okay, I can do that. And so if you can kind of step back and look at, is this my fear that something might happen? Or is it that my child might be in danger, which is, there are times that we may have to step in. But I often look at that whole place of problem solving, and we have a wonderful website, and I encourage you to go to it. There's a parent section, and it's divided into 4 to 13, 14 to 17. And specifically in the 4 to 13, we have something called toolbox activities. And those are strategies of what you can use to bring into your interactions with your children. So we have ones of quick ways to relax, how you can do some deep breathing, how you can do some physical movements to help to relax. We have others that are looking at how to take care of you and having those conversations about what you can do. But the one that I want to mention and related to this question is the problem solving one. And it really is helping our children problem solve through a situation. So it may feel like one that we have to bail them out of it, but maybe if we were to step back, we need to do it when we're both in a calm time. As we've heard, that cortisol gets our brain rushing and we're not able to think as clearly. But go for some exercise, perhaps get a snack, and then come back and be able to talk it through. And so what this activity is to help the young person identify what is the problem. So what is it that you're feeling they need bailing out, but maybe they can identify what that problem is. And then, as we've heard from Robin, that place of scaling. So let's look at a, 1 to 5. Is it a small problem from your perspective? Is it getting a bit bigger? Is it even bigger? Is it huge? Is it really big? And having them identify it, because that gives you a sense of how big a concern it is to us. And we're staying out of it. We're letting them talk it through, and that gets the prefrontal cortex, that thinking ability that helps to feel that we're in charge. And then we look at what could you possibly do? And then, look at all the brainstorming, and we try to button up 2 ears, listen, 1 mouth, button up, hear it from the child's perspective, what they could do in the situation. And then what do you want to do? And so they have the control and they choose it. And then they try that. And then we come back to them and ask, how did it work? So we don't have to bail them out as much as we encourage them. But along the lines too, with this problem solving, I often reflect on, we need to reflect who owns the problem. Maybe I own the problem as the parent. Maybe they weren't invited to that birthday party and I'm all revved up about it and feel like I want to go to that parent and say, why didn't you invite my child? Maybe I need to step back and say, I own this problem. I have to do something about it. Go for a walk, have a cup of tea, take some deep breaths, call a friend, but then not look at it that the child owns that. I own it. So we want to try not to bail our children out unless there is safety issues, unless there's morally something wrong, but trying to help the child develop that ability to feel good about being able to work it through.
Great, thank you. I'm cognizant of the time, so I just want to end off on one more question, and both of you feel free to jump in on this one. But what's one secure action or phrase a parent can say to our kids or teens when they're overwhelmed with daily stress?
No, those are ones that perhaps you can talk about it together. A teenager has their way of thinking and what's important to them. And so that collaborative role, I hear you that you have these moments that there's stressors out there, whether it be tests, whether it be friends, whether it be feeling I can't fit in, whether it be not being able to connect as much, whether it be us as parents giving you restrictions about what you're allowed to do, whatever can be those stressors, but asking them what might be a mantra, what might be some words that would support you through that time. So, maybe we can say to them, I believe in you. I believe in you to make the right decision. You can do it. Maybe it is, this too will change, or take a deep breath. Those are just some possibilities. Robin, jump in with some thoughts that you might have.
Well, I think it's important that, you know, we listen to kids when they are upset and struggling with things, but we don't have to give them all the answers, you know. And in fact, I don't think they really want us to have the answers. They need to find their own answers. And like you said, you just kind of take the attitude of they are going to, you know, they're going to work their way through this. And you know, you can even say things like, do you want my advice? You know, I'll give you some advice if you want it, or, you know, you'll figure this out yourself. I think it's important as adults that we don't get caught up in the dramas of teenagers, you know, which can be overwhelming for them, you know. And, you know, if we start taking it seriously, then they take it more seriously. And we need to put it in perspective that, you know, these kids who are causing them so much trouble, they may not even, you know, when they're grown up, they may not even remember their names, you know. So these are things that will disappear in their lives and are really, you know, you don't say that because at this point it is the most important thing to them. But if you don't get caught up in it, then that also communicates something to them. And you know, that's about it. Yeah.
Great. Thank you both. Do either of you have any final comments to share?
Doing
Well,
what you're doing, and that you're making it through this time, and it is historical, and there's no written script about how to get through this time.
So there were a couple of questions in the chat. I don't know if we could, I wanted to respond to the one about the kid who's spending a lot of time with his grandmother, and the grandmother doesn't really understand feelings or is not in that mode. And you know, I think as a mom, you need to help your son understand his grandmother, that she's not going to be that helpful to him around those things. And you know, it's an important thing for him to learn that not everybody talks the feelings game, you know, talks about feelings and is tuned into those kinds of things. So this is a good skill for him to learn. Everybody's different. So he can, you know, he's not going to be able to talk about feelings to everybody. You know, when he grows up and he has a job, maybe his boss won't be that interested in his feelings either. You know, if he doesn't work in mental health, he might have a person who's not that interested in feelings. So this is a good opportunity for him to learn a life lesson. Another person asked about how to support children with autism and mental health issues, which have been exacerbated in the pandemic. And I can just empathize, you know, I think that's true, that has happened. And, you know, hopefully they can get some mental health support. You know, I agree that individuals with OCD, you know, became even more, it was like the whole world was saying, you're right, we have to wash constantly and we have to be concerned with every surface and make sure that the germs aren't there. But, you know, interestingly, now the science is telling us that we don't need to be as concerned about surfaces, and it's airborne. And, you know, so while the OCD people had all the support for a while, and then that support is being taken away, you know. So, you know, it's all a learning curve.
It is. And I think how life does change. And so maybe there's analogies that can be used that, you know, you used to have support to put your winter coat on, and now you don't. And so we go through learning, and with that we have changes. And I know it was identified in that comment about a young person with autism and mental health concerns, that, you know, we still can use many of our strategies to find the calm, to get the exercise, to do the deep breathing, that can shift our brain and therefore shift our perspective of how we see a situation. And so I would encourage you to go to our website and see some of the ideas and some of the booklets that we have. There's one great one, Kids Can Cope, in terms of building resilience in home and school. And it looks at temperament of our young people, and that can be helpful. So encourage that.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much for your time and for your expertise today. It's very much appreciated. I'm sure our audience learned a lot. I am going to add a survey link in the chat for everybody. Please fill it out so we can continue to offer these wonderful talks and webinars to really meet your needs. So I'm just going to share that link in the chat. You'll also receive the link again in a follow-up email with the recording. So again, thank you, Robin and Anne, so much. And thank you to all our attendees for joining us today. Have a nice day.
Thanks, everybody.
Everyone, stay well.
Stay safe.